Good evening. I'm Eric Isaacs, president of the Carnegie Institution for Science, and really delighted to welcome you all here tonight for this presentation, special presentation on the age of data, visualization, the revolution. Visualizing the revolution. It's going to be a really interesting night, I promise you. Data visualization is a relatively new discipline. It's really been brought upon us by this fantastic amount of data, our ability to collect and analyze data and pouring in through the windows, the walls, everywhere, and really has made a revolution. So the word is appropriate. Today's data sets are almost unimaginable in size, scope, what they're about. And one article I recently read actually mentioned, and maybe one of our first speaker, Chris, will talk about it, that every day we're producing 2.5 quintillion bytes of data, 2.5 quintillion. And we can talk afterwards to understand how big that number is. And that's really extraordinary. It's just unbelievable what's happening today. And you can imagine that these huge data sets are a real boon and exciting for scientists as well as companies and everybody else, but certainly for scientists, which you'll hear about tonight. But only if we can figure out a way to use this data. And of course, data is just data until you can figure out how to use it, how to visualize it, basically, how to do something important. And in the end, we're taking these massive data sets to look for something perhaps tiny that you won't see easily, essentially pulling that elusive needle in a haystack out of this tremendous data sets. Data visualization works to really solve problems by offering new and comprehensible ways of looking at data sets that are so large and so complex that previous types of data processing are simply inadequate to the task. If it's done right, data visualization makes it possible for us to see very minute details, to look at trends that you wouldn't otherwise see, outliers, patterns that might otherwise be entirely invisible. And that makes data visualization a really crucial tool for scientific discovery, especially the kind of work we do here at the Carnegie Institution for Science. Our investigators are leaders in astronomy, global ecology, in earth and planetary sciences, and developmental biology, fields that require enormous amounts of complex, interrelated data. So data visualization makes it possible for us to accelerate our work by using computation as a third leg of discovery. You hear about experiment, you hear about theory. We're now seeing a real transformation in thinking about computation and data as that third leg in discovery science. And visualization itself makes it possible for us to better understand many, many things in science, the cosmos, the shape of the cosmos, to investigate deep into the interiors of planets, which you'll hear about tonight, and to delve more deeply into the origins of life itself. So I'd like to introduce to you who's going to be on stage tonight. Our guest tonight, our featured Chris Johnson. He's made some extraordinary contributions to this field of data visualization as well as computation. He is the founding director of the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute at the University of Utah, appropriately called SCI. The Institute is recognized around the world as a leader in visualization, scientific computing, data analysis, image analysis, et cetera, in a broad range of scientific and disciplinary fields, not just science, as well in medicine, and work that ranges from development of individualized models of the human heart to creation of a perfect digital version of Michelangelo's David. At the university, Dr. Johnson serves as a distinguished professor of computer science and a faculty member in the Department of Physics and Bioengineering. He's what you'd call a real Renaissance man, speaking of Michelangelo. He is a fellow of the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Society of Industrial and Applied Mathematics, and most recently, the IEEE. He has also won a number of awards throughout his distinguished career, including the IEEE's Sidney Fernbach Award for his outstanding contributions in pioneering work introducing computing, simulation, and visualization into many areas of biomedicine. After his presentation this evening, Dr. Johnson will join in a panel discussion with two of our own Carnegie scientists. Shauna Morrison is a mineralogist in our geophysical laboratory. Her research focuses on data-driven approaches to characterizing the coevolution of the geosphere and the biosphere, and on applications of advanced analytics to Earth and planetary systems with a particular emphasis in mineral relationships. She has also used sophisticated data mining techniques to understand the mineralogy of Mars, another of our neighboring planets, at an unprecedented scale. Our other panel member, Juna Kollmeier, is an astrophysicist at the Carnegie Observatories in Pasadena. She is also the director of the 5th generation of the Sloan Digital Sky Surveys, a massive project that aims to map the universe and understand it in much deeper detail. Her research is primarily focused on the emergence of the structure in the universe, and her work lies at the intersection of computational, theoretical, and observational astrophysics. Their discussion tonight will be moderated by Madeline Sofia, who is an associate producer on National Public Radio's Science Desk. She hosts the show Maddie About Science, which takes viewers behind the scenes to learn more about leading researchers and their work. And before embarking on her career in science communications at NPR, Ms. Sofia earned her PhD in microbiology and immunology from the University of Rochester. Like you, I am really eager to hear tonight's featured speaker and the distinguished panel, so please join me in welcoming Chris Johnson.
Here we are. Thank you, Eric, and thank you all for coming out this evening to hear a little bit about visual analysis. And when I give these talks, I like to give a little bit of background from where I came from in terms of the University of Utah, because I don't think that most people know the pioneers of computer graphics. Many of them came from the University of Utah. This is a composite of some of the pioneers. David Evans and Ivan Sutherland started our Department of Computer Science back in 1965. Ivan is known as the father of computer graphics and received the Turing Award for his work in computer graphics. Other of our famous graduates you might have heard of before. I think you use their products almost every day. Number 3 up there is John Warnock. John created PostScript and then founded Adobe and was the president of Adobe for a number of years. Another of our graduates, number 4, is Ed Catmull, who with Steve Jobs co-founded Pixar and is still the president of Pixar. You might have also, especially the older members in the audience, might also have heard of number 7, Nolan Bushnell, who created Pong, the first video game, and then Atari, which he sold in the 1980s. And then to the younger audience, then he created Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theaters. But here we're here to talk about today and the age of data. And some of you may have seen one of these composites of how much data we are creating every minute of the day. And so it's just astonishing. If we look up here and see that we have 4 million YouTube videos per minute every day. We have down here, let's see if I can get where is my second? All right, we will stop using the pointer and just start. You'll see that there's over almost 4 million Google searches every minute. And one that I was a little confused about was up here at the Weather Channel, where there's supposedly 18 million requests for the weather every minute of every day. And I thought about that for a while, and then I thought, that doesn't really make sense. But then, if you think about how many of you have a weather channel or station on your phone that automatically finds out the weather for you, you're not searching, but your phone is searching every day. And Eric stole my next punchline, which was that every other day we are creating 2.5 exabytes of data. He used quintillions, which is another name for that. So that's 2.5 times 10 to the 18th, so 10 followed by 18 zeros every day. That is equivalent to the amount of data that we created every other day since the beginning of mankind started recording things with books and whatever till the year 2000. So we are on this enormous exponential curve. And we call it the exascale. So we're living in the exascale every day. And we are soon to go over that to the next scale. And does anybody know what the next scale is called by any chance?
The nexus scale.
It's called the Zada scale. So we're about ready to have Zada scale amounts of data. So we are very visual creatures. More than half of our brains are devoted to image processing. Unlike whales, I learned recently, where 80% of their brains are devoted to hearing and sound. So for us, one of the best ways that we can understand and make use of this data, which is really one of the grand challenges of our century, is if we can map that data into something that our visual system can better understand. And so we spend a large amount of time trying to come up with new techniques, new mappings, new abstractions, new ways to map that abstract data into something that our visual systems can understand. And what you see up here are a number of visualizations that we have created with our collaborators. That middle one is a visualization of one of the largest simulations of a spiral galaxy forming. The one to the right in the middle is one of the largest combustion simulations. The second one on the top left is one time instant in visualizing the magnetic field of our sun. We also have in this bottom right here a multi-window visualization that's all interconnected for cancer genetics. And what I'd like to do is to just give you some stories about some of our collaborations with these different researchers and how we have created visual tools and techniques and algorithms to help them, enable them to better understand their science. I'll start with one of our recent collaborations, and one that certainly Carnegie and Juna is very interested in, is space and astronomy. And I think we're all enamored with space and astronomy. And this is called Open Space. It's a collaboration between a number of researchers throughout the world, including researchers in Sweden, led by Anders Ginnerman, the American Museum of Natural History at the Hazen Planetarium, Carter Emmert, researchers at NYU and also at NASA, as well as the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute. And it's really about, we've all gone to those planetarium shows where we see these more amazing, each year displays of what's there, but that's all pre-done canned data. And NASA came to us and said, can you do this with real NASA data? Can you create visualizations of our space missions, of the astronomy data that we're collecting, of simulation data? And the answer was, we think so. And we are in the process of doing it, and it's called Open Space because we've made it all open source software. So if you go to that link down there, you can download this, use this, modify it, do whatever you want. So this is one of our initial demos of getting Open Space running. This is Gene Payne, who is one of the software developers, and what he's doing is he's on a large multi-touch visualization table, and he's showing you how easy it is to navigate around the solar system with Open Space. You should note that all those stars are in the right positions, and that the trajectories that you're seeing are all calculated with the same mathematics that NASA uses to plan their missions. What we're doing now is we're going to zoom in, and we're going to pull down real-time satellite imagery from NASA, and we are, of course, going to zoom into Salt Lake City, and and where you see is the Great Salt Lake that's there. And so we're zooming in. We're also going to now project this onto what we call a power wall, which is 36 30-inch monitors where we get much higher resolution. We can also project this onto planetarium domes and other systems as well. So what Gene is going to do, though, is he's going to take his hands off of the touch table. And did you see what was happening? It was moving still when his hands were not touching it. And that's because we are getting this real-time data and the Earth is spinning. And so this is really exciting that we can do this large-scale, high-resolution astronomical data and interact with it. Most recently, we have put in the entire Sloan Digital Sky Survey which is a mapping of the galaxies throughout our universe. And here is Gene again. He's slowly rotating this because if you rotate it too fast, you can get a little queasy seeing this. And again, we're going to pop this up on our screen and on our big power wall and be able to see. So each of those are representing, galaxies within our universe. Our speaker, Dr. Juna Kollmeier, who will join us in a little bit later, she is the next director of the next Sloan Digital Sky Survey. And so we are talking with her about how we can get data from the next digital sky survey into open space. One of the things that Eric mentioned before was about a project with Michelangelo's David statue. And this was a definite departure for us in terms of visualization, but in some ways, but not in another, because this is really about very large scale data. And so this, several years ago, Mark Lavoie from Stanford University somehow convinced the folks at the Accademia Museum in Florence to give him full access to Michelangelo's David statue. And he used a high-resolution laser range-finding scanner to scan the statue at sub-millimeter resolution. And then he needed to visualize all of those millions of triangles, and that's where we came in because we were able to do it. And so we're zooming in here, and you can start to see the little triangles that are there in Michelangelo's statue in his face. We could also change the lighting to when the real statue was outside, you could see what it looked like at different times of the day. So we thought that was pretty cool, but what is even cooler is we now have this working at much, much higher resolution. So these are my colleagues, Valerio Pescucci and Chuck Hansen, who are doing twofold things here. So what you're seeing now is almost 1 billion triangles, little triangles there, and each one of these frames is 2 gigapixels in size, not megapixels like your phone, but gigapixels. We're going to zoom into that same place in the eye that you just saw in the previous one, and at this resolution, you can't really see any triangles. So it is a near perfect digital copy of Michelangelo's David statue. And one of the things that we found out about the statue when we were looking at this is that when the statue was outside, hundreds of years ago, someone, I'm thinking maybe like a teenage boy, carved their initials into the back of one of his legs. And what you will see in this next rotation here, and when we zoom in, are the initials that were carved into the back of the leg of Michelangelo's statue. I don't think you can quite get close enough to it now in the museum to be able to look at that. So it's an amazing. Here we go. We'll see if we can see. Can you see the initials MN over here? Who is MN? We don't know. It's an historical mystery. We also have an application that you can use to be able to look at this on your iPhone or iPad. All right, so back to science and big data. This is a really exciting international project called the Connectome Project, and it's a set of neuroscientists throughout the world who are using high-resolution electron microscopy and other microscopies to try to get at the fundamental wiring diagram of our brains. This is the way that they do this is also remarkable technology. They take the highest resolution electron microscope and they aim it at the smallest possible piece of the brain, and then they save the data, dump the data, and then they go to the next one. They go, it's like image, save, dump, image, save, dump, image, save, dump, and these things run 24 hours a day for 7 days a week. When all the data comes out, it doesn't quite look like this, so we have to have algorithms to put it together. You see that little red square that's in the upper left there? That's the maximum size of an electron microscope, and that's basically 4,096 pixels by 4,096 pixels, so 4K. So if you're lucky enough to have a 4K projector or monitor at home, that's that size. And then what they do is they do the next slice, and the next slice, and the next slice. We get this exquisite resolution in the plane, but they can't do that same process when they do the depth. So you'll see that things actually change quite a bit as we go, even though they're cutting the smallest that they possibly can to get there. Two things to note about this is that the overall resolution that they are able to get is 2 nanometers per pixel. That's 2 times 10 to the minus 9th meters per pixel in terms of resolution. And one of those little bitty data sets is 16.5 terabytes of data. So not your megabytes or gigabytes, or gigabyte, that's next one up, terabytes. So we have developed technology, visualization technology, that enables them to interactively visualize those entire 16.5 terabyte data sets. And so there is one of the connectomes on our wall, and the neuroscientists were thrilled. They spent days and days looking at this data because no one had ever seen the brain at this resolution in this particular area. So it was like Leeuwenhoek with a new microscope. And really, this is like, we think of this as a new microscope. Robert Mark and Brian Jones, the neuroscientists who created this new technology for creating this data, and then we were able to take it and visualize it, and they were able to see things that they had never seen before. They made scientific discoveries that they had never been able to make before because they could see at these higher resolutions. So it was really exciting. And this is an animation of just one cell type in the connectome, in this particular connectome. And when people have told me our brains are highly connected, I think we all have a mental model of that. And then when you see that, remember, this is at 2 nanometers per pixel, how small a piece of brain that is, and this is only one cell type. And when they put in all the cell types, there's no space that you can see there. It gives you a different sense of what it means for the connectivity and the complexity of those connections within our brains. So staying with biology, but switching to different types of large-scale data, I want to tell you about work that one of my colleagues, Mariah Meyer, is doing for visualization in biological data. And Mariah is doing something which we call information visualization, where instead of 3D and spatial plus time, she really is dealing with higher dimensions of data and not the 3D spatial. So you can think of things like social networks or financial data or genetics or things like this. She's been working with a number of different biologists in which she goes in and interviews the scientists, reads their papers, find out what their main scientific questions are, looks at the tools and the visualization systems that they're using currently, which are kind of usually these kind of one-size-fits-all, and then finding out what works and what doesn't. And then she goes away and designs from the ground up a new visual analysis system to solve their particular biological problem. Puts it in their hands, the researchers' hands, gets feedback, does another version, gets more feedback, does another version in this rapid prototyping. And here are 4 of the systems that she's created. And you'll see that they all look a little different. And that's because they're solving 4 different biological problems instead of just the one-size-fits-all. So let me tell you a little story about one of my favorites. This is a system she has created, which is called MISB. And it was done with researchers at the Broad Institute, which is a combination between MIT and Harvard, some comparative genomicists who were comparing the chromosomes of humans, which are represented in the outer ring, with the chromosomes of other mammalian species. And they had a model for how these chromosomes should map. And this is the first time they looked at their data in Mariah's system. You'll see those dark red and green bands at the top there. Those are correct. All the other ones are wrong. And they immediately knew that their model was wrong. And that's another great thing about visualization. And because we're so visually oriented, when we see something, we often know it's like immediately, wow, that's wrong. So visualization is good for debugging in many ways. So they spent a lot of time going back and working on their model. And here's an intermediate version of their model. And you can see it's better than the first version. But at this point, they decided that they had something fundamentally wrong with their model and they needed to start over from scratch. And they used Mariah's visualization tool and their own theories and data to come up with a new model. And here is the solution, the model they came up with that was experimentally verified and then published. Mariah asked the principal investigator of the research, how long do you think it would have taken you to get here without the visualization tool? And he said, quite frankly, I don't think we ever would have made it. And this is really the power both of the right visualization tool, but also of collaborative science, of two people or groups that neither of them could have solved this problem by themselves, but only working together in an interdisciplinary way that they could solve this important problem. And I do want to give you the sense that you saw some stills here, that interaction is so key, and it's so key to our thinking of hypothesis testing, of try this, get feedback, try that, get more feedback. And we want to, you really have to have this kind of interactive feedback. And so this is a kind of a sped up little version of the kinds of things that they were doing and bringing in different data sets and different tools and different types of things. Mariah continues to be very popular among scientists of wanting her to help them with their science. Let me tell you another great biological story about a collaborator. This was a collaborator who was a developmental biologist, Chi-Ben Chen, who was looking at how zebrafish develop. That was his model organism, and he developed a transparent zebrafish so he could watch how the organs were developing. And so they put video cameras in there, watching over time, every day, every minute, of how the zebrafish was developing internal organs. And then the poor graduate students had to take those videos and then like segment out all the different organs and over time, and it would take them weeks and sometimes months. And so the tools were just not there for doing it. And Chi-Ben Chen came to us and said there had to be a better way. And my colleague, Dr. Chuck Hansen, said, yeah, I think we can work on this. And so over multiple years of time, they created this system that has grown in popularity with biologists who are using confocal microscopy and other imaging modalities to be able to do these multi-channel, very complicated systems to track cells, to be able to do that segmentation of developing organisms, as well as very large scale systems. And let me play this little video that talks a little bit about Flowrender, but also one of our collaborators using it.
Flowrender is a tool that was developed for confocal microscopy data, and it's focused on giving biologists an easy-to-use method for doing visualization and analysis of 3D confocal microscopy data. So Gabrielle Cardin here at the University of Utah has found that Flowrender is a valuable tool for her research in the Cardin lab.
The Cardin lab works on congenital defects in muscle development, such as congenital diaphragmatic hernias. We're using it to image developing limbs and developing diaphragms, which are very complex three-dimensional structures. So I would say that we would be unable to do any of our work unless we had Flowrender.
That's what you want to hear from the people that you help, that you're making a difference with it. It also creates these amazing, beautiful images, and I know that people have used this. There are these biological image photography and image competitions internationally that Nikon and other groups sponsor, and people have used Flowrender to win some of those competitions because it creates these amazing systems. So let me tell you a little bit about some of the research that I'm doing and my colleagues in uncertainty visualization. One of the things that is happening is that as visualization is being used more and more for understanding data, we have to understand that none of that data is perfect. It all has errors and uncertainties associated with it. And so one of our real challenges is how do we go beyond the showing of the data and finding those patterns, but also enabling us to understand the levels of uncertainty and error so that we can make better decisions under uncertainty, which is what all of us do every day anyway, but especially when we have scientific data, whether it be experimental or sensors or computational, it all has a relative amount of error. So what are ways in which we can do this? That top visualization in the middle there is work done by two of my colleagues at the Ski Institute, Ross Whitaker and Mike Kirby, and they came up with a way, oh, that's not good. Don't you love it? You know, I give talks all over the world, and that never happens. Fortunately, it's going to start up again. Yay! So they have created this new visualization technique that extends what is called a box plot. That's one of the more useful two-dimensional ways of looking at graphs and their errors and uncertainty. And what's really exciting about that is that it has been now used by people at NOAA and NCAR to start trying to better understand those hurricane trajectories. And I'm sure you've all seen this, especially where you live, that when the hurricanes, this is Harvey and Irma from about a year and a half ago, and you see all these models. So they have these models from Europe and US, and they show the predictions of where the hurricane might go and end up. And by and large, I think everyone thinks they're confusing and hard to understand. And so they're using some of this new work on uncertainty visualization to take all of those models and try to find a better way where this here, the yellow line is the median of where the hurricane should go, and then the kind of purplish line, pinkish volume or area that's there is the confidence intervals of where it should go within there. And so these are screen grabs from NOAA's website internally that they're using for their own researchers when Harvey and Irma were here. They were trying to see if this was going to help their own researchers. Hopefully at some point this will be actually used out for others as well. Let me end by telling you just a little bit about, I'd like to tell you about what I'm doing now. And so this is some new research that was just accepted for publication last week. So this is hot off the press. Nobody's seen it before in terms of the research. And it's a way to visualize very, very large scale, what we call vector and tensor fields. The application that you see in this particular images are two. One at the top is called, it's an imaging technology which is called diffusion tensor imaging. And it's a way to get at the structure, underlying structures of the white matter tracks within our brains. And this is used for fundamental understanding of the connectivities within our brains, but on a daily basis, it's used for surgical planning, for tumor resections and other operations. And because this is the structure that takes the signals out to throughout the cortex. And so surgeons, for example, do not want to cut through these different sensory pathways, but as you can see, it's a very, very complicated network. We are able to do these very, very high resolution interactive visualizations now. And below is a fluid dynamics simulation of the flow past a torus that's on our Powerwall again, and again, being able to do that interactively for very large flows. And this leads us to a problem that we're working on right now, which is, this is a system collaboration with one of my former students, now Dr. Hanwei Shen, who's a professor at The Ohio State University. And we started doing it for trying to better understand a way to get at complex fluid flows. So this is some computational fluid dynamics. And when we realized we were doing this, we realized, well, this is the same problem that those neurosurgeons have for pre-surgical planning for tumor resections. And so we're right now working on a way that we can interact with those very complicated visualizations of white matter tracks so that surgeons can plan how to get from the outside and go to the inside to that tumor and avoid those important white matter tracks and those sensory pathways. So stay tuned for this. This hasn't been published at all yet. It's brand new. All right, so I'm coming to my end, and let me tell you how we get this all done. And these are our productivity machines. We have 5 espresso machines in case 4 break down. And in the lobby of our institute, we have a ping pong table. if you got one of the ones that folded up, we were going to put in the closet and only bring it out every once in a while for people to play. It's there the whole time. And what we've realized is that ping pong is the international sport of geeks. So these nerds and geeks, they play ping pong from China and India and Italy and Brazil and North America and et cetera. And we have a tournament every year, and that student who is in the top right is one of my former PhD students who won the tournament one year, and you knew it was going to be a problem because he not only had his own paddle, but he had a leather zippered cover that came on the ping pong paddle when he came to play. And so we had a feeling that he might know something about ping pong. Here are all of the amazing people at the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute at the University of Utah who do this work. So we're about 200 faculty, staff, and students. We're very interdisciplinary. We come from multiple departments: computer science, bioengineering, math, physics, etc., and work in this interdisciplinary way to solve problems together. These are the national research centers that we direct, and they're funded by the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Energy. We have an Intel Visualization Center. We also have a newish center on computationally designed efficient materials that's funded by the Army Research Lab. And I've only been able to give you a very, very small taste of the research that we do here at the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute. So I hope you will go to our website and check out more of our research. All of our software is open source software. We have over 40 different open source software packages for visualization and image analysis and computing. And if you have any questions about what we do, I hope you'll send me some email. So thank you for letting me tell you a little bit about our research. And now I would like to have our other panelists and also our commentator come and join us. So please, Maddie and Juna and Shauna, please come up. And of course, we had all of these all set up to go. Since my computer went out. Ta-da.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. That was an amazing talk, right? Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, and thank you all so much for coming. This is such a great crowd. So here at Carnegie, we have been exploring a number of machine learning algorithms and advanced visualization techniques to better understand the types of data that we're looking at, and also to address big outstanding questions in Earth and planetary science. So today I'm going to talk about just one of those techniques, and that is network analysis. Chris mentioned that there are, he explored a number of ways to look at all of these three-dimensional data and touched on a little bit of multi-dimensional data. And that's really why we were interested in network analysis, because it allows you to view multiple dimensions at one time. So some of the questions that we're interested in answering, or the goals that we're trying to forward, is to document the diversity and distribution of minerals and fossils on Earth, to compare the mineralogy of different terrestrial planets and moons, to understand Earth's co-evolving geosphere and biosphere, and to discover previously unknown minerals and fossils. So now let me talk a bit about what networks are. Networks are graphs. They're composed of nodes and links between these nodes. In our case, nodes are mineral species, or they are fossil genera, but they're any entity in a system. And they are connected by links. And in our case, this is coexistence of fossil species, or this is coexistence of two mineral species on Earth's surface. And these links and nodes come together to form a network. And so here we're looking at a network. This could be mineral coexistence, or it could be fossil coexistence. And the really interesting thing here is we can look at many, many dimensions at once, many nodes and links between them. But what we can also do is overlay a number of attributes. So we can overlay a number of parameters, up to about 7 on a network. And these are things like age, abundance, chemical composition. And we do that by varying the color of the color, the shape, the size of the links and the nodes within the network. So let me show you an example of a natural network. So a rock is essentially a natural network of minerals. This is a picture of a granite. Many of you guys have this in your home, in your countertops. And this is a network of mineral species. And those mineral species include things like quartz, orthoclase, albite, and biotite. And they come together to make up this rock network, if you will. So we can compare this rock network of minerals to that of other types of rocks. So here we're looking at a network of minerals. Each one of these nodes represents a mineral in igneous rocks. Igneous rocks are rocks that form due to the cooling of magma. And we can overlay our granite here. So this is what our granite looks like. These are the minerals that make up a granite. And so you can see this is in network analysis, we call this a clique. It's a group of connected nodes. And we can overlay other types of rocks, so things like an olivine basalt, a nepheline syenite, and this allows us as researchers to actually compare the similarities and differences of these rock systems and to be able to make some scientific inferences there. You'll see some rocks share minerals, some of them don't, and that can be really useful information. So another type of network is, this is a trilobite network. So trilobites are a type of fossils, and each one of these nodes represents a genera. And I'll pop up some pictures here for those of you that are unfamiliar. So we start out with the most simplest organisms, and as they evolve, they become more complex through time. And what you may have noticed here is actually that there is an embedded timeline in this network. So this is an evolving system, that makes sense. We have a timeline that is embedded in this network. But that's interesting because the only piece of information we actually included here is coexistence. So did these things coexist? So it's really interesting that a timeline is falling out of this. But of course, it's an evolving system. So we also see this in our mineralogical networks, which is even more interesting. There's another way to visualize these evolving systems, and that is with taking time slices of these networks instead of showing them all at once. And that is, so that's what we're doing here. So each one of these time frames is 1,000,000 years. And you'll notice that there are certain large swaths of time where everything more or less remains the same. It's pretty consistent, you know, it's the same genera. But then you'll see suddenly everything switches. All of the former genera go away, and there's this whole new group of trilobites. And this punctuated event actually represents a massive faunal turnover or a mass extinction event. And actually, we were able to work with our colleagues, Drew Macenti at Harvard, who's a paleobiologist, and we actually discovered, using network analysis, a previously unknown massive faunal turnover event late in the trilobite record. So that was really exciting to actually discover essentially what is a mass extinction event. So we're pushing forward. We're working with people like Chris to try to help us get more advanced in our visualization. So here you can see me playing with a virtual reality system in which we're using three-dimensional networks so we can really kind of dig in there and learn more about our data sets. Of course, there are many, many ways to visualize your data. You've seen a couple incredible ones today. There are also a lot of advanced analytical techniques and machine learning algorithms that you can use on the back end of your data. And so we're really excited to keep pushing forward in this data science direction with our research. And with that, I'll turn over to Juna.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. Well, this is such a fun topic and such a. I'm really excited to be talking about visualization in astronomy and astrophysics because we're really undergoing. Every field is in a different state for how it's using this incredible silicon-enabled revolution. So how we're using both these new data sets that we're getting and also this massive quantity of data that we've been hearing about tonight. As Eric mentioned, and as Chris mentioned, I'm the director of the 5th generation of the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. And the Sloan Digital Sky Survey really was an inflection point in the history of astronomical surveys because of the invention of the CCD and the ability to take these digitized images that you could analyze across across large swaths of skies. This was a huge change in the amount of data that astronomers were used to. Of course, it started on the Sloan telescope and has now leapt to Carnegie's DuPont telescope, so now we are an all-sky survey. And I just want to highlight, 21st century data sets sort of look something like this. So instead of scanning little patches of the sky, we're scanning the entire sky. And we're not just scanning the sky once. We're scanning it many times. So I'm showing here the pattern of observations that SDSS-5 will take. And every single time a piece of this image gets darker, it means we've revisited that part of the sky again. So not only are we looking at massive quantities of data in space, but we're also looking at massive quantities of data in time as well. And this time domain is a huge area in astrophysics where we're sort of exploring variations of objects on seconds, milliseconds, years, megayears, gigayear time scale. And so what do we do with all of this data? So as you heard before, this is just the growth just in the SDSS-4 of the amount of data that SDSS has taken. Now these are small little terabytes here, so we're going up to petabytes. And of course, next generation surveys are going orders of magnitude larger than this. So the quantity of data is increasing, as we've heard. But it's also the character of the data. So raise your hand if you know what this is. It's a galaxy. Okay? So this is what a galaxy looks like, right? But a galaxy is not just a two-dimensional entity, right? It's a three-dimensional entity, but it's also physically a very high-dimensional structure. And so what we're showing here is a data cube where every single piece of this data cube, we're showing an image and also kind of peering through that galaxy in frequency. So now you're not just seeing the two-dimensional image of the galaxy, but you're also seeing the spectra. Sort of imagine the rainbows that the sun makes after a rainstorm. You're seeing the three-dimensionality of that data in this physical space. And so every single pixel in that image is a spectrum or a rainbow of that part of the galaxy, which encodes the physics of the galaxy itself. Now, what do you do when you have a very complicated new data set that is pretty tricky to understand? So first of all, you spend a lot of time coding things up and trying different things yourself, but at some point, you go talk to Chris and his colleagues and see what crazy stuff that they've got going, because they're just focused on so many different tools. And so we visited the Ski Institute a few years ago and started a project that would, this is one of those data cubes. So if you took just one slice out of this image, that would look like this simple galaxy, okay? But now you see the galaxy is this very detailed structure where frequency is on the axis going sort of diagonally in the page here. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to use new sophisticated methods to find features in this complicated data cube. So you have a blob of gas that you want to understand. What is that blob? Is that blob of gas coming from a star that has exploded? Is it coming from a shock that has been created by some merger? And in order to do that, you have to separate out the noise from the real features. And so we're using like the network analysis that Juna just mentioned and some very sophisticated topological structures. This is in collaboration with Bei Wang, who is a faculty member at SKI, and her graduate students, part of the Carnegie Venture Grant Program. We are analyzing, this is SDSS data, manga data in the bottom right here, and in the upper left, I'm just showing a schematic of how we separate out different features in a topological plane. Now, that's on the data side. So that's how we're using different advanced techniques to understand the data better. But what about on the theory side? And that's my sort of intellectual home is in theoretical astrophysics. On the left here, I'm showing the temperature map of galaxies as they form, starting at the earliest parts of the universe and evolving all the way down to the present day. And you see it kind of looks like one of these brain networks that Chris just showed. There's this network of filaments and voids, and you have galaxies that are blowing hot bubbles around them. The pink there is gas that's 10 to the 7 Kelvin. It's very hot. And even the blue is much cooler gas, but it's still 10 to 3. So what's happening there is that galaxies are blowing up, okay? And in the other panel here on the right, I'm showing a galaxy that is being ablated by falling into a bigger system of galaxies. And this is a calculation that a former Carnegie fellow, Stephanie Tunnison, performed. Let's see if I can get that to play again. Let's see. Oh, nope. Oh, well. There we go. Let's get it. Maybe not. I'm a keynote person, not a PowerPoint person. There we go. Oh, there we go. So you see that galaxy is getting ablated as it falls into a much denser system. And so the shape of that galaxy is changing, but also the gas is getting thrown away. Now, these are beautiful movies, right? I think they're pretty cool. They're pretty to look at. But what do we do when we compare galaxies to our predictions? We turn all of this into one number, maybe two numbers, a mass or a rate of star formation. But clearly, you don't have to be a theoretical astrophysicist to realize there's a lot more information in these calculations. How do we extract all of that information? How do we do principled comparisons of these calculations to the observations themselves, to like those data cubes that I showed you before? And that's why we're trying to build a viz lab. So Chris showed you his power wall. We want to take one of these California garages and turn it into something great. This is what we are hoping to turn it into. Space, an interactive space where we can actually sit in these galaxies and in these calculations and actually try to figure out new methods for comparing these theoretical calculations to the types of data that we're getting in surveys like the Sloan Digital Sky Survey and in other smaller surveys that we're doing with our Magellan telescopes. And so that's sort of the state of the art from astrophysics, really using new techniques to both interrogate the data, discover new things, and also understand our theoretical calculations better so that we can make better comparisons between observations and data. Thanks.
Wonderful. Awesome. Isn't data the best? I mean, that was really awesome. Let's give him one more hand. That was really cool. Thank you. All right, so I think we have about 15 minutes for a discussion with the panel. So it seems as though data visualization can be used for a lot of things. Finding patterns that we would never find, dealing with these huge data sets that are numbers and letters that I didn't know about this until Tara, way bigger than that, and communicating. So I'm interested, are most fields using these equally? Are some fields really leaning on the communication and dealing with the data set? Are they doing different stuff? Juna, why don't you lead us off?
So my perspective on this actually is evolving all the time. Fields, you get to a certain point where your data demands a higher level of understanding. And when you hit that point, then you really need these tools and you hit it in different dimensions. So for example, in mineralogy, you have a problem of sparse data and high dimensionality data. In astrophysics, we have a problem of large quantities of data, high dimensionality of data, in some cases, sparsely sampled, time-varying data. In other fields, they have a problem of, you can't make a mistake, like when you're doing brain surgery. And so every field hits this wall at a different place, and that's why what they do at SKI is so exciting, because they really are able to zoom in on what is needed for that particular subdiscipline.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Can I follow up with that?
Sure.
What we have seen is exactly that, is that all these fields are becoming basically data science fields. They're driven by data, and whether that's from explosions of experimental data, from new imaging data, from sensor data, from the size of the new computation, the sizes are just getting so big that they're not able to use their more traditional methods to be able to analyze it. And one example was that Connectome data set that you saw that we had. It was so large. What they had to do is, what we really need to do is to track those different neurons through all those different electron microscope images. And traditionally, those were biology graduate students sitting in front of a computer screen, manually going and doing this on every single neuron, and then they would do the next slice and do this and this and this. And the data sets got so large that they did a quick calculation that if they were able to do like one image every 5 seconds, that it would take them 8 years to do one full volume at that resolution. And that's getting a little long for a PhD and for graduate school.
Even for grad school, that's too long.
So then they need some help with that in terms of computational algorithms, some visual analysis, and that's when we start seeing them come to our door.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that's been really interesting for me moving to science and into the media is that we know now that just giving people numbers and data isn't necessarily going to inform their decision making. And that people actually learn a lot better from stories. They remember more things that they hear in a story than they would hear just numbers. And I'm interested, like, what is the potential for storytelling with this? And you did a little bit of it, so let's talk about it a little bit, Chris.
Yes, and it is, I think, when we do our best jobs with visual analysis and the communication of that, it's through storytelling. Mm-hmm. And within the visualization research community, there are whole workshops on storytelling with visualization. And I think much of it came from, we learned a lot from the computer graphics animation industry and one of our famous alums at Pixar, because whenever they're doing the new latest Pixar movie, they're doing all these storyboards. And one of the things I talked about with Ed Catmull was there's so much attention paid to the computer graphics technology and special effects and all of this, and he said that actually comes much later after the story is done. The story is first. What is the story that you want to communicate effectively? And then you find the right way to communicate that. And for us, it's what are the right visual abstractions and mappings and techniques that we can best tell that story for the scientists to better understand and communicate their data.
Absolutely. I mean, Shauna, is storytelling something that you all focus on, and how do you do that exactly?
Yes, absolutely. As Chris pointed out earlier, we are very visual creatures, and I think that, and we often think in this kind of linear storytelling fashion. So, we're often thinking about evolving systems, and so we like to think about this, from, the formation of a planetary body and what has happened both from a geologic perspective and from a biologic perspective throughout time. So we think of it almost in a temporal sense often. And I think for me, understanding an evolving planetary body, that storytelling aspect has been extremely helpful.
I mean, you say storytelling, I say theorist. So, I mean, I do think that's what these visualizations are doing. Our stories are our way that we're understanding, in my case, the universe, in Shauna's case, the Earth, in Chris's case, the brain, or all the other stuff. I think that theoretical guidance is what helps us interpret the data. It helps us understand what kind of data we need to break a certain degeneracy or problem that we're facing. And so, I think story is just a fancier word for theory, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime we have an emerging field like data visualization, anytime we're really moving in a new direction, we have an opportunity to bring in new people, new ideas, new tools. I mean, Shauna, do you see this as an opportunity to build a more inclusive workforce, especially for women and people of color? And how do we do that moving forward?
I see this as an incredible opportunity, and I think everyone up here would agree with that. Data science democratizes science. All you need to be able to do this usually is a laptop and access to the internet. A lot of people don't have access to elite universities or to $1 million pieces of equipment or to $1 billion satellites, right? And by putting the data out there and by making all of this available to everyone, you're now giving people access to do their own science with just their laptop. You know, Chris emphasized the open source nature of everything that he's doing, and I think that's critical. And I think that's how we democratize science. Make everything that we're doing open access and everything that we're doing open source. And it just levels the playing field.
Absolutely. I mean, what about the, you know, the workforce in general? Do you think that having that open access is going to invite people that haven't traditionally had the resources to go into science to really make that shift and make that move? And, you know, and who's out there to kind of to move that along, like any programs specifically or anything like that?
Absolutely.
And that's for everybody, of course.
Yeah, I think that it's really going to change the way the workforce is coming about. And I mean, I know people who have no formal data science training who have gone to places like edX and Coursera, and there are a number of these, you know, just completely open and often free programs where you can learn to become a data scientist. They have no formal training, and they essentially go on and become data scientists and go and actually enter the workforce to do this. So I think there are a lot of programs out there. I'm sure you guys know of even more than I've mentioned.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of programs, and I think that it's important, you know, he who pays the piper or she who pays the piper calls the tune, and it's important to remember what tuner you're calling. So in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, we make all of our data with tools for a broad range of audiences publicly available so that little kids can play with the data, retirees can play with the data, astronomers can play with the data, biologists can play with the data, and that has made the data more useful. So it's really counterintuitive, and it's something that as humans that kind of are trained to hoard resources, it doesn't make sense, but your data is more useful if you just give it away. And of course, there's no money to be made in galaxy data. So, I mean, you know, when you're looking for gold, that's a different story.
I have a colleague who talked about this data hoarding in the past, where some people, because they've spent so much time getting the data, you know, they don't want to share it. And he used to recast the term data mining as data mine. But I think we're seeing this tremendous transition where we have open science, and it's open data, it's open models, it's open sources, and I do think that it helps forward science in general, and it makes it available for everyone to participate. And you know, one of the exciting things that the Open Space Project is doing is making all of that available. And one thing we're doing right now is we're in the process of doing a virtual reality version of open space. So in case you don't have your own planetarium or large wall to do this on, that you can now get these ever less costly virtual reality devices and put them on and see the entire Sloan Digital Sky Survey. And you know, I was thinking about myself as a kid, you know, painting the glow-in-the-dark ceiling of the stars on, you know, your ceiling, and now instead you're going to put on your VR glasses and you're going to go look at NASA and walk on Mars from the Mars rover missions and things like that. And by kids, I mean pretty much, you know, any age. But it's going to be very cool because that's all going to be open and available.
Awesome. Well, we have 2 microphones at these 2 aisles. We have about 5 minutes to take questions. I see you are ready. I like it. Go for it.
Well, I figured you might take 1 or 2. But this is really interesting. My question is regarding the social sciences. In other words, the state of the world now is so confused and so changing and so dramatic, and yet it's very hard for the brain to comprehend what is going on with population movement, with wealth, with health, with water, with so forth and so forth. And I think this is really great if it could be done in a way in which even just the general population could visualize what is happening to us now, what's happening to the environment. That's the question.
So there are groups throughout the world that are making strides in this area of trying to put together these visual dashboard tools of publicly available data so that anyone can go in and start looking at the data, analyzing the data, making their own decisions about the data rather than pre-made ones done by various other people who are trying to persuade you about something, whether it's to buy this or that or vote this or that, but to make your own decisions with the data. And that's where I think the data is so empowering, and where visualization and these other analysis tools can really help everyone make their own decisions about them. I'll say that the biggest challenge we have is making those easy to use and to make them for everybody and not just domain scientists. The human-computer interaction part, as you may have noticed if you've ever used a computer, your phone, or anything else, not everything seems to work right the way you think it should in an obvious way. And Ivan Sutherland, who I showed as the father of computer graphics, he made the first top 10 computer graphics research challenges list back in the late 1960s, and on it was human-computer interaction. And about every 10 years, somebody takes that task again and makes a new list, and every 10 years, human-computer interaction is still like on the top of the list because it's a hard nut to crack, but that's what we need.
If you could help me get out of the grocery store, I would really appreciate it.
All right.
We're working on that.
Yeah. All right, let's take one more question. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. I had a question regarding data visualization as it applies to data science, specifically like machine learning algorithms and the complexity regarding those. I was wondering how visualization is applied to simplify the algorithmic complexities.
So this is very important from the in astrophysics. We have a lot of data-driven approaches, machine learning approaches that are helping us learn more about systems at lower signal to noise. So in other words, it used to be that you had to get a really, really perfect spectrum of an object in order to understand how much iron it had or what its age was. But now we've realized that there's information all throughout the spectrum, and we can actually use a much lower quality spectrum to get similar data, as long as we have a very good training set. But fundamentally, it's these stories that we want. Like, we're not going to be satisfied if the computer gives us a trend. We want to understand what's physically happening, where that information is dispersed in the spectrum. And so the visualization really helps us understand exactly how the algorithm is working. It takes a lot of the, it used to be sort of a black box type of approach with some of these systems, but now the visualizations have caught up, and now it's really not like that. You can actually see where the information is, and that helps you both improve the methodology, but also understand some of the physics better. At least that's in our case.
Yeah, certainly we see the increase in machine learning and deep learning and these AI techniques in almost every field that we see, and there's really a great opportunity for both sides in terms of machine learning informing new visualization algorithms, but also visualization algorithms helping better understand how those machine learning algorithms really work under the hood, and hopefully better understanding the underlying algorithms and science to make new discoveries. So it's a really exciting time right now.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Let's thank our panel one more time. Really great. Absolutely. And again, thank you all for coming and engaging with us. This has been really great. And we'll see you afterwards.